The consumer preference is definitely changing. We're all more aware of where our data is going. Every week you're getting, it feels like every week, you're getting a notification that your data has been compromised somewhere. And I think we're at a point now where it's becoming really clear, if you're not a company that specializes in data distribution and data handling, you probably shouldn't be holding that data for very long, if at all. Consumers are more acutely aware of that. But I think you sort of have to balance that against, how that potentially could be taken advantage of in terms of fraud. And then also how regulators think about this as well, because the sort of reusable wallet space is essentially sort of potentially giving the message that actually KYC is not something you're obligated to do anymore. An individual sort of responsible for pulling it together. And then, there's trust frameworks that you have to abide by.
Welcome to the Peak IDV Executive Series video podcast, where I speak with executives, leaders, founders, and change makers in the digital identity space. I'm your host, Steve Craig, founder and chief enablement officer of Peak IDV. For our audience, this is a video first series. So if you're enjoying the audio version, please check out the full recording on executiveseries.peakidv.com, where you can watch the full video, you could read the transcript, or you can access any of the resources or links that we discuss in today's conversation. I'm super excited about this week's episode. I'm speaking with Charlie Minutella, the CEO of DataZoo. DataZoo helps companies process and verify sensitive customer information securely, seamlessly, and at scale, enabling a friction-free customer onboarding experience. Headquartered in Sydney, Australia, DataZoo has offices in the US, the Netherlands, New Zealand, Singapore, and the Philippines. Charlie has over 2 decades of experience leading risk, identity, and compliance teams. He was appointed to the CEO role of DataZoo in February of 2024 after DataZoo's founder, Tony Fitzgibbon, transitioned to chairman and chief strategy officer. Prior to DataZoo, Charlie served in numerous executive positions in companies like Thomson Reuters and most recently, London Stock Exchange Group, where he led the Refinitiv Risk Division. Welcome, Charlie. Thank you for making the time to be on the podcast.
Thanks, Steve. Good to be here.
Let's get started. How do you describe DataZoo to people who have not heard of your company? Like, what's your typical elevator pitch?
Yeah, as the name would suggest, DataZoo is a company that brings together different and disparate sources of information to help companies throughout the identity sort of verification process. We're an organization of about 75 people that serves a global customer and partner base. So we're oftentimes the party behind the scenes, making sure that the data that's being presented in the onboarding process is verifiable by trusted sources so that our customers can make informed onboarding decisions.
Excellent. You really do have a global team. The locations I listed, it's like the sun never sets for DataZoo. What's your personnel footprint across the various locations?
The company was born in Australia, and we have a significant portion of our employees that sit across 3 locations there. But we also have teams that sit around the world in the US, in Europe, in the Middle East as well, providing both go-to-market capabilities as well as tech resources. So we are very much a global company that does have that follow the sun type footprint, which I believe is an advantage for us.
What are some of the industries that DataZoo serves, and what specific pain points are you helping them address?
So we're trying to help the world engage in a safer, more secure digital ecosystem. And so, we are helping a range of different companies who are trying to work with their customers in that environment. So that's fintechs to payments processors to social media companies, marketplaces, retail, et cetera. And we do that both directly with those types of customers and then through our partners. So typically any company that is looking to establish an identity of an individual or entity, not only for financial services, but for a wider range of purposes, including age assurance for restricted goods, as an example, we are there to support them in that process.
That's great. And if I understand correctly, you're based in the New York City area?
I am. I'm here at DataZoo U.S. headquarters in Jersey City, New Jersey, I am the the CEO of the company globally, which means that with such a team of across the world, especially in Australia, it's a lot of late nights, but getting used to that.
And how did you get connected with DataZoo as an Australian-based company? Can you share perhaps the story of how you got connected with the board of directors and the leadership team?
Yeah, when I was ready to leave London Stock Exchange Group, I wanted to stay in the space, and my background is very much in data. The last 7 years, I was running data businesses within Thomson Reuters, which became Refinitiv, and then London Stock Exchange Group. And I know that data is the thing that customers really need in order to get really comfortable around who they're doing business with. And so I wanted to stay in this sort of kind of sliver of the space. And I got to know DataZoo through a relationship I had with Bill Spruill, who was founder of GDC. Bill and I were just talking about interesting companies in the space, and he mentioned DataZoo, and I got connected to them that way. And when I found out what they did and how global they were and what their aspirations were, both in terms of business as well as the type of company that they wanted to be and what to be known for, it was a really attractive proposition for me. So that's how it all started.
Very cool. And your background is really impressive, Charlie. Like I see the history of the time that you've been in data. And if I read it right, did you get your start in a sales role at Thomson Reuters back in the day?
I did, yeah. That's how I started at Thomson Reuters. And before that, I was at a company called Practicing Law Institute, which is a legal training and data company. And was there for 4 years in different types of sales roles, and then went to Thomson Reuters as well in a similar capacity. And throughout that time, I knew that I wanted to get into leadership, and tried everything I could throughout that time to get more and more exposure to general management, and ended up my last role at what became LSEG was running the risk business and leading a number of different portfolio companies within that division that did a variety of things in the risk and compliance space. So yeah, I did start in sales, but wanted to kind of get into this sort of more general management strategy leadership role.
And prior to joining Thomson Reuters, did you already have an understanding of compliance and reg tech and financial risk? Was that part of the legal role, or did you learn those things at TR?
Yeah, it was actually. So when I was at Practicing Law Institute, toward the tail end of my time there, was essentially the start of the financial crisis. So there was a lot of change in legal and compliance at that time, and we were one of the companies that was helping the sort of legal industry understand the changing landscape. You had banks that were failing, you had new regulations that were coming in really quickly, and the world had to adjust. So that's where I kind of got a taste for this space, and obviously the sort of KYC space and the onboarding space. I sort of learned more about, became more intimately involved in as I was running the KYC as a service business at Thomson Reuters. So yeah, it's been something I've been around for a long time now, and I've seen it evolve quite significantly over the last 5 or 6 years.
It was a really great rise in your responsibilities through TR, from the sales executive role to being director of financial markets and head of America. So you mentioned the KYC as a service. How was the market evolving during that time when your career was evolving as you were growing as a leader?
Yeah, it's interesting. The KYC as a service business was called KYC as a service, but really what it was KYB. We were helping global financial institutions onboard complex counterparties. And that was before KYB was a buzzword. And essentially what we were trying to do was to help mutualize that process because we thought that, most of the major banks were working with, most of the same players as they were banking across multiple jurisdictions. And so we felt that we could help kind of make that process more efficient, and then use data that was in the public domain to get a jump start on that and to be able to validate the information that was coming from those businesses. So still trying to do that today, but now it's completely in a digital setting, right? what hasn't worked is taking paper processes and trying to digitize them. That hasn't worked with KYC, and it really hasn't worked with KYB either. And I think we feel more of that pain in KYB than we do in KYC today. But the industry is still kind of struggling with these issues globally. So as far as we've come, and as far as we've had to come because of obviously mass digitization through COVID, there's still a long way to go. Companies like us continue to have a lot of motivation to go out and solve that.
Great. Well, I'd love to dive back into DataZoo, but before we transition back to that, I want to touch on the 5 years you spent with London Stock Exchange Group. Can you share more about how your role evolved there and the work that you were doing?
When we became Refinitiv, so when Blackstone acquired the financial and risk business of Thomson Reuters and we became Refinitiv, it was a really interesting time because organizationally, we kind of became this kind of new company, and our heritage was, went way back to Reuters and the carrier pigeon, which is something that anybody from the former Reuters organization will tell you about. And then we became sort of the kind of this large kind of independent fintech. And so it was a really exciting time for me and for all of us at Refinitiv. But also the risk business evolved significantly at that time as well. We made 2 acquisitions. We acquired GIACT and GDC over that time. And those were both really exciting acquisitions to make that really got us more firmly involved in the digital identity and fraud prevention spaces. But we also owned WorldCheck, which was a business that I ran as well. And WorldCheck is the industry's largest data set of high-risk individuals and entities. It's used by pretty much every major fintech and financial institution around the world, and plays a really significant role in helping to identify individuals that might be sanctioned or may or may not be involved in financial crime. So that was a really interesting journey for me as well. So I ended up, essentially running one of the biggest franchises in this space, which gave me a lot of exposure to obviously the global landscape, changing regulations, but got to understand the onboarding and risk assessment processes for a number of major players globally. It gave me a really unique perspective that I bring to DataZoo today.
Yeah, it's fascinating. And when I think about that time period, LexisNexis had been making acquisitions, a GB Group had been making acquisitions in the identity arena, and then London Stock Exchange is making these moves. What did the M&A process or the experience teach you about the market? Did it set any new signals for you as you went on the path to get to DataZoo?
Yeah, it's really interesting. Being involved in a number of different M&A processes gives you a lot of different perspectives around not only going out and finding the potential targets, but also sort of calibrating what's important to you as a business in terms of where you want to go, what you want to do, and how these companies that you're looking to acquire will actually fit in, and the combination of those companies be a greater value proposition than the 2 independent of each other. So there's a lot of work that you have to do, not only in terms of making sure the financial models work, but also making sure that you're acquiring a company that can fit into your puzzle. And that's not always easy. When you're doing due diligence, especially if you're in a competitive process, and some of the processes that we were involved in were highly competitive. There were auctions, they were highly sought after assets. There was a number of companies that wanted to bring them into their organizations. Trying to figure out sort of what the company would be like in your world is oftentimes very challenging, and you're making a lot of assumptions. You try to make as many informed decisions as you can. You rely on your networks to give you perspective. You rely on joint customers. There's a number of things you can do to try to get a good feel for it. And ultimately, what I've learned and what I bring to DataZoo is we want to build an organization that's world class, that has many of the attributes of many of these larger organizations, but also with the ability to maintain the agility and nimbleness that we want to maintain so that we can continue to be the type of partner that our customers expect us to be. So finding that right balance is really important. But ultimately one day, if DataZoo decides to become part of a wider organization, we have a good understanding of what we need to do in order to fit into those organizations and become an acquisition that really brings value to the industry as a whole, not just whoever acquires us, if that's the case.
Thank you so much for that background. I think this is a great segue into your latest chapter, which is as chief executive for DataZoo. Now, it's just been a few months. I'd love to hear how you think about going into the role from maybe it's a 30, 60, 90-day perspective. Like how do you set the right pace for yourself coming into this business with so much industry knowledge and background?
Yeah, it's interesting. Every company is different, right? So I learned a lot about DataZoo before I got into the role. I had the opportunity to talk to not only the team internally, but a number of customers and got a good feel for what the value proposition of DataZoo is. And that's been really helpful to be able to establish what DataZoo does well, not only from an internal perspective, but what the industry feels about the business has been a huge enabler for me to be able to come in and make sure that I understand where our time is focused, where our time should be focused. And for me, the first sort of 30 to 60 days has been just a lot of knowledge gathering. So talking to the team, understanding the people, understanding the culture, understanding what's working well, what needs improvement. But that's a big part of being in this type of role. You need to be able to relate to all of your stakeholders. So your team, your customers, your investors, your board, regulators, industry advocates, whoever it might be. And so I've done a lot of listening, and over the next few months, we'll be doing a lot to make sure that we are building that world-class organization. I want DataZoo to be a joy to work with. I want DataZoo to be a joy to work for, and we're working really hard to make sure that we are able to do both of those really well. But it all starts with culture. We have a great culture at DataZoo. We're an organization that feels like we're serving a bigger purpose. We want to be able to have a company that is great to work for, that's innovative, but solves a problem. And I think you hear a lot of CEOs talk about sort of what they do to help drive the onboarding process, make it more efficient, more effective, more friction-free. And we do all those things, but we'll do all those things well if we think about what we're really trying to solve for. And for us, it's financial inclusion. We want to make it easy for everybody around the world to get the same level of access to financial services. I'm a huge believer in that. To be able to participate in the wider digital ecosystem and know that it's safe and secure. And that's not only financial services, but it could also mean social media or marketplaces or other types of endeavors that you're participating in digitally. And then the second thing is to fight financial crime, is to prevent fraud, to make the system fairer, to make it more trustworthy. And if we have that in mind, we're going to build the best products possible to solve those issues. And that the team has really rallied around that concept, and we're really excited to help the market understand more about us, because we're still not an organization that's widely known in the space. We've got tons of customers, and we've got millions of people where our data helps them get access to financial services, and they don't even know about it. And some of that's by design. A lot of that's by design. But we do think there's a great opportunity for our name to get out there and for more to know about what we can do to help solve those kind of overarching issues.
Those are really worthy causes and missions, Charlie. And that's one of the reasons why I started Peak IDV, to help with both of those. The financial inclusion, just having access to the digital economy is critical. But then on the other side, we see a lot of fraudsters, bad actors, those that are trying to exploit all the work we're doing to create that inclusion. So very much aligned with you in that regard in the digital identity space. In preparation for this episode, I did a bit of research on DataZoo. I'll admit that I had seen press and I had learned a little bit about the company prior, but for this episode, I did a lot of investigation, and your website is phenomenal. I think you did a great job laying things out in terms of the different products and services. So I've got a question to tee up for you about your ID UX ecosystem. I'd love for you to share more about what that is.
Yeah, sure. So think about the ID UX ecosystem as a set of capabilities. We offer a range of different solutions that help throughout the ID verification journey, from our core asset, which is an API that allows you to take data that you collect in the onboarding process, whether that's manually inputted or taken off of documents, and verify that against a range of trusted sources. That's sort of what we're known for in our core capability. We do that across 60 countries, and we verify tens of millions of people annually doing that, which we think there's obviously a lot more to do there. We also do that for businesses, so being able to verify entities in the onboarding process. But we've also developed a range of capabilities that are more traditional platform plays. So document verification, biometrics, and things along those lines, as well as different sources of fraud indicators like mobile phone intelligence and email intelligence. And then we're able to deploy those through API, through a platform application, or via a decentralized wallet. So essentially, we can play different roles where we either integrate into one of our customers or partners' platform or journey, or we provide the ability for them to set up their own journey through our capabilities. And then for those that are close to the decentralized identity play or the digital wallet play, we have a capability where an individual can essentially own their own identity verification process. So, we're really excited about all of those, and we think that the ecosystem obviously has additional opportunities to grow, but essentially we could fit into however a customer wants to use us.
For those pillars that you mentioned, those are named on your site: core, safe, and flow. And what I liked about how you separated the core and the flow was in either a no code or a low code model. Do you see different organizations pursuing one over the other? Like, how should we think about what type of organization would choose a no code path versus your low code API?
Yeah, it's all based on a number of different factors, which could include their own maturity. So it could be a startup that, where they want to rely on an organization that specializes in building onboarding journeys to help them, put something in place quickly because, they're doing something that they want to focus on things that are more core to their business. So we have the capabilities to help them plug in. Or you could be a very highly sophisticated organization where you've built your own journey and you use best in class, or you've developed things on your own, but you want to essentially plug our APIs in to enable different parts of that process. We can work with either. And so it really depends on where an organization is in their life cycle. Do they want to prioritize speed? Do they want and focus on their core competencies, or do they want to really own the journey and bring in the best in class assets in each part of the journey to support that? And then there's a number that'll fall in between. So yeah, I mean, it's a very interesting time right now. I think you see organizations sort of go back and forth on this topic. They'll go from, yeah, we want to own everything, to we're not experts in this and we should really be partnering and trying to find a singular provider that can help us do it all. I don't think there is a singular provider that can help you do it all at this point. We'll see as you've talked about on your podcast, the market's changing dynamically. There's likely to be consolidation. It's still highly fragmented, very regionalized. So if you are a global company, it's really hard to kind of get behind one provider. But there's definitely going to be some change in the market where you'll see different providers coming together to offer stronger regional or semi-global offerings. So I think we'll see that evolve over the next 5 years for sure.
Just a few moments ago, you mentioned your ID UX Safe product, which is in the decentralized or reusable identity wallet space, which is growing in popularity. I'm seeing more and more companies introduce wallet-like capabilities, yet I haven't quite seen the demand reach the same that we've seen for existing traditional, call it KYC as a service type plays. How does the ID UX safe product interoperate within your stack of the other two modules?
Well, think about it as actually just flipping the customer. So when we talk about core and flow, that's for a company to help them onboard a customer. But if you think about safe is the opposite. We're giving the capabilities to the end customer to be able to essentially build their identity, to be able to, in a way, distribute that, and have control over who has it and what they have access to on a dynamic basis. You're right. There are a number of these initiatives out there. I think everyone is sort of working towards the cold start challenge. Yeah, how do we get the right type of demand? How do we get a critical mass? How do we play with big tech in this space? Because as much as you see Apple and Google having that sort of head start advantage by being in everyone's pocket, one or the other, or both in some instances, they've not necessarily truly embraced this as like wanting to own all of that. They are happy to be an enabler, but we really haven't seen them say like, yeah, we're gonna pull all this different data together and offer an Apple-based version of an identity token. Just hasn't happened yet, and that might change over time. But what I do know is that the consumer preference is definitely changing. We're all more aware of where our data is going. Every week you're getting, it feels like every week you're getting a notification that your data has been compromised somewhere. And I think we're at a point now where it's becoming really clear if you're not a company that specializes in data distribution and data handling, you probably shouldn't be holding that data for very long, if at all. Consumers are more acutely aware of that. But I think you sort of have to balance that against, how that potentially could be taken advantage of in terms of fraud. And then also how regulators think about this as well, because the sort of reusable wallet space is essentially sort of potentially giving the message that actually KYC is not something you're obligated to do anymore. An individual sort of responsible for pulling it together. And then, there's trust frameworks that you have to abide by. When you've been fined, $1 billion, in some cases, it's sort of hard to get behind that. So we'll see how that all plays out. I think, we are kind of at a crossroads though, where things have changed so significantly that, again, it's really hard to imagine that, all of these sort of companies out here are going to hold all our data for an infinite amount of time.
Many of the pundits in the industry and the experts who've been seeing this coming for decades are saying we're getting close. The reusable identity, decentralized identity, some call it self-sovereign. I think with what we've seen with the blockchain and the ledger technology in the last few years, we have all of the ingredients. Like, it's no longer a technology hurdle. It's more a usage hurdle. And you mentioned the cold start problem. I've seen that from many practitioners, buyers of the solution. They'd love to integrate a wallet, but how many customers are on that wallet for them to make sense to integrate it? And then on the flip side, it's like you want to enroll yourself as a consumer, but where is the value to you if it's not ubiquitous? Like, if you can't go to 20 different sites like you could with a sign in with Google, like how do you create that urgency within yourself? I think another area of this, which is a challenge, is just the business model. Like, people get when they're going through a KYC check. If you're a bank, as an example, you would pay whatever solution provider a click charge, and then you've got an account. Like, the math is very simple, but when you've got different layers of providers and relying parties, and you've got the IDPs, the actual identity verifiers, like, how do you think we overcome this business model gap? What do you think the path is there?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's going to require a significant shift. I mean, like you said, most IDV providers are charging per click, per search, per transaction. But really, this becomes more of a perpetual model. To be able to thinking about kind of pulling all this data together and being able to in real time sort of permit and accept it. That means that the user is actually driving potentially a lot of cost. And then how do you actually, you know, sort of manage that in an appropriate way? One potential like bad outcome of this is actually it becomes too expensive to onboard customers, and you have to go through a massive pre-qualification process before you're even considered. And like that doesn't do anything for financial inclusion. So yeah, I think about this actually a lot because I'd love to figure out how we could be an advocate for that change, and being able to make identity verification more real time, perpetual, because that's going to help if it's done the right way. There's a lot of work to be done there.
Yeah, it's very much that innovator's dilemma. Like I think about Blockbuster when you'd go in and you'd pay each time you'd run a DVD or a VHS, and they had to adapt to the model. And you had companies like Netflix emerge where it was perpetual, was ongoing. You pay a service fee, and it's hard to take that revenue hit. Where do you think some of the use cases where we could see that perpetual model come into play? Is it maybe proof of age, like in an age restricted commerce? Or could it be account opening?
Yeah, I think age assurance is just a huge market. There's a ton of regulation that's coming out across the world. In the U.S., you've seen various state announcements very recently. There was an announcement in Australia last week about it as well. It's going to, with everything that's gone on around social media, restricted goods, like here in the U.S., like vape and those types of things. It's a really important sort of social problem that we have where we can't, in a digital world, like really verify whether it's an age appropriate person or not trying to get access to something, whether that's content or it's a product, or anything in between, or a service, right? So you can see wallets, sort of digital wallets, ID-based wallets being a really huge enabler for that, where you can get some confidence that you're dealing with the right age-appropriate individual in all cases. And it is something that I think that our space as a whole, really needs to get behind and spend some time on, because it is something that has a ton of benefit. As a parent, I want to make sure that my kids are not exposed to things I don't want them exposed to. It's earlier and earlier where they're getting access to things they shouldn't get access to. So I think that that's a space where a wallet has a really, really strong application that could be good for wider society.
Yeah, it's certainly like a third pillar of mission is emerging. You've got financial inclusion, providing financial crime, but then there's this digital exclusion. It's like there's certain members of our society, specifically children, that shouldn't be accessing certain types of content, or even just using some of the services, social media services that aren't great for their health, or that you should be involved in as a parent. I think that certainly is a evolving use case. But I think about our industry, there's typically, when we're in a B2B world and we're not so much focused on the consumer, but creating business relationships, there's typically the two value propositions. You're going to help reduce friction to help book more accounts, or you're going to help reduce operational cost or fraud loss cost. You'd mentioned one of the pillars in your ID UX ecosystem is fraud. Can you share a little bit more about your fraud prevention tools and what you do to prevent financial crime?
Yeah, we want to be able to share data that's not associated with the identity of the individual, to be able to help organizations identify potentially fraudulent transactions, because you can certainly identify an individual at onboarding, but obviously they're at risk of takeover, or potentially a synthetic identity over time gets developed, and that type of risk. So we're getting more and more into alternative data sets. So looking at mobile phone intelligence, owner of the phone, where it's been registered in terms of operators. We're looking at email intelligence. When was the email created? What's its history? We're looking at sort of dark web intelligence. So was the identity stolen? When did it appear on the dark web? We're also looking at sort of death notification as well. So like, death checks. So like, is this to this person, did this information appear on a sort of death roll at some point? So we're trying to figure out ways in which we can use different types of data sets to identify, potential ID fraud instances. It's really hard to get all those right if you're a criminal, to be able to get all the right data, to get it on the document the right way, to do it in the right place, to do it with the right phone, to do it with the right email. It's just that, the more and more data you can bring in real time, the greater opportunity you have to be able to identify potential areas of fraud or risk. So, we see that as being a huge part of the future, where our customers are realizing that, hey, it's going to take a lot more than just like a really slick onboarding process. We have to be able to validate that the data is what we're seeing in the market. We need to be able to, on a more real-time basis, pull different data sources in to be able to determine whether or not anything's changed from a risk perspective. So, I think for us, we want to be, as I said, as our name would indicate, we want to bring different sources of data together to be able to allow customers to feel as safe as possible and throughout the life cycle.
Well, let's talk about another area that is really exploding, which is generative media, deep fakes. We're seeing a lot of impersonation attacks emerge. We're seeing that certainly within the vendor ecosystem and the media. Does DataZoo have a role to play here when it comes to artificial intelligence and Gen AI and how that's affecting our customers' channels?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the more that you can do to be able to take the information that you're collecting and being able to, test that against what's in the market, I think, that's really important. Like I said, it's very difficult for a criminal to get it all right. To be in the right spot, to have the right phone, to have the right email, to have all the right information, to be in the right location. I mean, these are all things that, if you're able to have that within your ecosystem, now you're kind of in a position where you can, be better at identifying red flags and being okay to stop and introduce some friction. I think that's always still, a challenge. If there is something that's identified, to be able to, take the right steps to dig in more on that. I do think governments also have an important role to play in this as well, to the extent they can make, different types of data that they've collected or issued more available to the ecosystem. There's always that sort of push and pull on that. We sort of see things in sort of the broader regulatory space. You kind of get sort of different vibes out of the government in those areas. In some instances, they want to make data more available. In other instances, they're trying to restrict it. So even the new U.S. regulation on beneficial ownership, that data is not going to be widely available. So they're putting the onus on business owners to provide that data, which you saw when you filed your taxes this year. But also for then, giving it to the wider ecosystem so that they can, use it to validate or verify businesses. And that's, it's not as transparent as you'd like it to be.
Yeah, there's always that push and pull. I think it was just a few years ago that we finally saw the eCBSV Social Security number verification system come online, but it was very expensive at the end of the day, and it was only limited to very specific use cases. So vast majority of the market that wanted to tap that signal couldn't really. And then for this Corporate Transparency Act, as a business owner myself who has to now fill out those forms and you read the fine print, it's like it really is more about the tax system and verifying for IRS purposes than making that data available to do business verification. So it's like, on one hand, we do want to constrain what those acts and those laws do, but on the other hand, it's like, what a missed opportunity to leverage some of that data in different ways, which kind of leads to this other area that is growing in popularity and demand, which you talked about earlier in your career around business entity verification and KYB. What is it that DataZoo is doing with respect to KYB, and what is your value proposition around helping businesses onboard businesses?
Yeah, well, we want to make data associated with business onboarding more easily accessible. And one of the challenges, and in one of your previous podcasts, you talked a little bit about to sort of the challenge of this being a bit of a workflow issue, which is true. But it's also a cross-border issue. So if you look at, complex ownership structures, and there's a number of companies, I mean, most companies have, ownership structures that are multi-step. And a company like ours has multiple entities around the world. So to onboard even DataZoo, can be a challenge. And as a business has an expanding global footprint, we actually feel this quite significantly as we're starting opening bank accounts around the world. But being able to help an organization actually follow that lineage in the beneficial ownership structure to get to the individuals, and then be able to do a KYC check on the individuals, that's what we're really focused on. So being able to make the data more accessible, to be able to allow companies to follow the ownership structure, get to the ultimate beneficial owners, be able to KYC them and get comfort around that. That's a critical element, right? I mean, I think, if you look at, ownership structures, and where entities are domiciled in non-transparent jurisdictions, obviously those are very high risk. And so, you can understand why organizations that are onboarding businesses digitally are very sort of cautious about how much they do from a kind of pure digital perspective to how much they want to introduce some friction in there and get some manual review in there, because it is super high risk for them. So yeah, I mean, I think from our perspective, we think that this is still very much a data play. And obviously, as we continue to work with our data partners around the world, and as well as, governments who are included in our data partners, we're trying to make it very clear so that they understand, the challenge of this. It's a great opportunity to drive economic growth, to allow businesses greater access to financial services. But at the same time, we have to prevent fraud from coming into our system, and we have to, make sure that financial crime is something that we're considering. It's very hard to do that unless data becomes more widely available on businesses and beneficial owners. So, kudos to the U.S. for the initiative. Execution's, not exactly where we want it to be, because it's not giving, the wider ecosystem that transparency. But I think it's the step in the right direction, and we're having those conversations globally with various regulators and government agencies to try to get as much data available as we can.
For the companies that DataZoo serves as customers, are there particular jurisdictions where maybe they're trying to onboard businesses that are US based in other countries, or vice versa? Is there a particular type of customer that would use your business verification?
Yeah, I mean, we work with customers that are trying to onboard businesses that are in this setting that are like, they're not high profile businesses, right? So, it's not like they're looking to onboard Microsoft. They're looking to onboard small companies that are in their supply chain, or they're looking to onboard companies that are, potentially taking advantage of their services. Think about it in a marketplace, like an Etsy. But these are sort of sole proprietorships mostly. Or you're looking at companies that are, around the world that, are looking to either enter the US market or enter a new market and want to get themselves established. So it sort of, kind of runs the gambit of what it could be. But yeah, I mean, ultimately, it's very similar to our KYC customer base. It's just, trying to help enable global commerce and do it in a kind of digital way that's safe and transparent.
Well, we're coming up on time, Charlie. And before we close out, I'm curious, I know you're still ramping, but have you started to think about what the vision for DataZoo will be in the next few years?
Yeah, I mean, we're on this relentless pursuit of data transparency and excellence. So we want to make it as easy as possible for our customers, whether they are direct or through partners, to be able to verify as many people and companies as they possibly can. And to do that by using trusted data to make them feel confident that they are onboarding the right people and entities. That's our focus. So we're thinking about data expansion within our existing jurisdictions. We're thinking about coverage expansion globally. But our goal is to be the identity and fraud data platform of choice. We believe that we can empower the ecosystem, whether that's a company that's doing it on their own or it's a company that's using one of our partners to do that. We have a role to play across both of those. And we want to make sure that we're giving everyone, like I said, the confidence that they need to do business in a faster, more transparent, safer way. So that's our vision. And I think over the next 5 years, our goal is to really make a big dent in that. And I think we're on a path to get there.
In preparing for this conversation, I was reading the about section on DataZoo, and I saw that one of the things your organization does is it invests heavily into digital literacy. You actually have a few programs. Can you close out on DataZoo topics with just sharing about the work that the company's done to help with the digital divide, which of course leads, I think, to financial inclusion?
Yeah, so DataZoo has been supporting a number of schools in Australia that don't have the means to be able to educate their students on digital literacy. So in those instances, we bought computers for the students. And then on a regular basis, DataZoo employees actually teach those students using those computers on various topics of sort of technology and digital literacy. So that's something I really believe in. It's something that we're going to expand over the next year or so across all the markets that we do business in, including here in the U.S. So really look forward to expanding that because, like I said, our goal is to be able to make the digital ecosystem safer, more secure, and that starts with education, like anything else.
Yeah, just access to technology. We spend a lot of time building these great digital experiences, and we want them to be inclusive. But then not everyone has the latest and greatest Android or iPhone. Not everyone has persistent internet access at home. So we have to think through ways to support those individuals with that knowledge and learning. So that's a really good endeavor. Well, Charlie, we're about to close out. It sounds like you've seen some of these episodes of Executive Series. I'd like to know a little bit more about the person behind the press release. So for yourself, when you're not leading DataZoo and ramping and probably jet setting around the world to different offices, like where do you like to spend your personal time?
Yeah, I'm a father of two very active kids, 9 and 6. So I spend a lot of time with them in their various sort of initiatives, but sports is a big part of their lives. So I coach my son's baseball team, and I spend a lot of time with my daughter's soccer team as well. And I've learned a lot about leadership and sort of team and driving performance by watching girls soccer. And so shout out to Ridgewood Maroons 10U girls soccer team. It's really interesting just to see how much they've grown over the last 2 years in kind of getting together and not knowing anything about how to play soccer to how they've evolved as not only individuals, but as a team. It taught me a lot about, being able to work as a team is really being not only the best at what you do, but knowing, how everyone else's job so that you can help them. And watching my daughter go from position to position, and then her friends doing the same and seeing how they've all grown. They know where everyone's going. They know where they need to be. They know what they need to do to score. They know what they need to do to defend. And I'm taking those lessons back into this role. So I would say, when I'm not at DataZoo, I'm learning a lot more about what I could do to make DataZoo better. And that's coming from all my experiences, including being a father and a spectator.
It's like take one hat off, put a different hat on. Try not to cross-pollinate too much the ceremonies you do at work with maybe the ceremonies and the sporting events. That's very, very cool. Very cool. Well, we're at time, Charlie. Thank you so much for spending time with me to go through your background and your work at DataZoo. For those that are watching this episode, what type of conversations would you be looking for from the audience or the market at large?
Yeah, well, I mean, I love talking about the hardest challenges the industry has. So, we are, like I said, working really hard to empower the ecosystem. And, we really would love to continue to build out our network of individuals who are like-minded that want to get involved in the hard issues and, sort of serve a higher purpose, which I think we're doing. So yeah, connect with us, wherever you see us at conferences or on LinkedIn or through our website, or to any one of us directly. We're really excited to learn more about, how we can help in the space, but also, we're helping to evangelize what we're doing. So, excited to talk about both of those things.
Great. Well, thank you so much again, Charlie. I'm really excited to see what you do at DataZoo, and I'll continue to watch your company's success and progress in months and years ahead.
Great chatting, Steve. Thanks a lot.